morning everyone. For today's topic, we will discuss about the chapter 12, students with physical disabilities, health impairments, and severe disabilities. So at the end of this chapter, the students should be able to define, compare, and contrast the terms physical disabilities, health impairments, and severe disabilities. The next is describe the skeletal and the muscle systems of the body, of the human body. The next is define and differentiate orthopedic from neurological impairments. And the next is enumerate and describe the types and classification of physical disabilities. So the next one is identify and discuss the chronic illness and health-related conditions. The next one is enumerate and describe the severe and multiple disabilities. And the last one, enumerate and describe the educational programs and support services for students with physical disabilities, health impairments, and severe disabilities. So these are the vignettes of persons who triumph over their disabilities. So idols, heroes, leaders, stars, and whatever they are called, they are people we look up to and emulate, people we pattern our lives after. Almost always, Filipinos have the tendency to put someone in a pedestal to serve as a guiding force in their day-to-day lives. We tend to put them above us to serve as an example and an inspiration so that we can follow their footsteps or perhaps copy what they have done in order to achieve something in their lives. So our first person is Apolinario Mabini, the sublime paralytic hero. So to a large segment of the Filipino people, Mabini was one of the heroes who shaped Philippine history as the sublime paralytic. So he is one of the heroes who have been respected through the generation. Mabini's role in the revolution was that of a leader who was known for his authority, one who gained prestige because of his intellectual capacity, his principles, and his ability to influence persons and situations and to analyze circumstances. In short, he was the epitome of a hero. So Mabini can perhaps be credited for the way persons with disabilities are now slowly coming out of their shells. So Mabini is indeed worthy of recognition. No one can dispute the significance of his frontline role in our Philippine history. His actions have been shown that his disability was not a hindrance. There are, however, some issues that cloud Mabini's story that need to be clarified. For example, people wonder about his real illness and the cause of his death. Some say Mabini contracted his paralysis when he was 32 years old and not when he was born. Some also believe he did not die of his paralysis, but that he caused cholera, which became the cause of his death. Historically speaking, Mabini as a boy was very bright. He preferred to read and study rather than play with his friends. So in fact, his enemies feared him. They continually tried to arrest him. When the revolution broke out, he was arrested and taken to San Juan de Dios Hospital, where he was interrogated. Through his pen, Mabini displayed the range of his vision of his country with his incentive mind. He brought the perspective necessary to give direction to the Philippine Revolution of 1989. So his steadfast nationalism brought him to the hills of Coyapo, Nueva Ecija, where he continued to fight against the Spaniards and later the Americans. In his letter to his brother, Mabini expressed his longing to go home, even only to fulfill his wish to die in his native land. And the rest is history. His shining example has caused the interest of many Filipino people, especially those with disabilities. So the next person is Arturo Acosta Borjal, the Good Samaritan. From childhood until the last few days of his life, Attorney Arturo A. Borjal, who died on June 6, 2002, was admired by many of our countrymen, the poor especially. Wearing two leg braces and a pair of crutches, he was known in his school as a brainy guy. He graduated at the top of his class in elementary school with academic honors at the Ateneo de Manila University. He pursued his tertiary education in the same school where he finished his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Laws, likewise with honors. So Attorney Borjal, along with the Philippine Star Funding Chairman, the late Betego Belmonte, publisher Max Sullivan, and Tony Rosses, founded the renowned national newspaper, the Philippine Star, in July 1986. He became deeply involved in activities concerning the sector of persons with disabilities. From 1988 to 1990, he was Executive Director of the National Council for the Welfare of Disabled Persons. He served as Disabled Sector Representative at the House of Representatives during its 8th Congress in 1990 when Cory Aquino was the president. So he was one of the principal authors of RA 7277, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Disabled Persons. This law grants the rights and privileges for Filipinos with disabilities and is considered a milestone legislation per person with disabilities. So after he left the government service, he became a full-time daily columnist in several national newspapers. So he continuously inspired persons with disabilities to strive for self-reliance and called attention to disability-related issues like prevention of the causes of disabilities, rehabilitation, and equalization of opportunities. As a crusading sector leader, he was elected as officer and trustee of principal organizations involved in disability concerns. So he used his newspaper column, The Jaywalker, to open the eyes of the nation and the Filipino people on the potentials of persons with disabilities as productive and self-reliant citizens. He continued to push the political, civic, academic, and business sectors to provide equal opportunities for qualified persons with disabilities. So Attorney Borjal wrote the book Walking Through the Pathways of Life, a collection of essays culled from among 8,000 newspaper columns he had written in 20 years. So truly, Attorney Borjal lived a full life by being a man for others. So the next person is Stephen W. Hawking, the great scientist of the 20th century. So Stephen Hawking is a Lucasian professor of mathematics and theoretical physics at the University of Cambridge in England. He is considered by many to be the foremost theoretical physicist in the world today. So while a student in college, he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. ALS is a motor neuron disease of middle or late life that involves progressive degeneration of nerve cells that control voluntary motor functions. Initial symptoms usually entail difficulty in walking, clumsiness of the hands, slurred speech, and an inability to swallow normally. With his 1988 bestseller, A Brief History of Time, Hawking became perhaps the best-known scientist in the world. Why the rush to buy a dense volume of mind-bending physics? Every wry, Hawking insists, no one can resist the idea of a crippled genius. So the next person is Christopher Reeve, a superhero in the eyes of the world's disabled. So patients at Tal Hashomer Rehabilitation Center in Israel had no time for Superman, only for Christopher Reeve, arguably the world's most famous disabled man and now an ambassador for scientific research. I was once told I would never move below my shoulders. Reeve told 50 patients and their families during a visit. The actor was paralyzed from the neck down in 1995 after a horse riding accident. But I began to get motor and sensory recovery 5 years after the injury, he told them. The point is that there is no such thing as conventional wisdom anymore. And no patient can be told by any doctor of what the future will be. You are my hero. The young man told Reeve after an emotional meeting at the Weizmann Institute, which employs some of the world's leading neurology experts. But at the Tel Hashomer Hospital, the first to arrive to catch a glimpse of her idol was a 23-year-old Israeli who reads everything she can on the evolution of Reeve's health and even set up a website with links to related articles. She said, at the age of 15, I was affected by a rare syndrome which touched my nervous system and left me a quadriplegic. Half a year later, Christopher Reeve was wounded and I identify with his situation, she said. I tried to contact him ever since because we became soulmates. I felt our lives were developing in parallel. Christopher Reeve really is Superman, not because of what he did on the silver screen, but because of what he is doing now, said Don Burke, a representative from the consulate in Los Angeles, California.